It is 7:30, so let's get started. I am Vivian New. I'm going to be your host tonight. Our main talk is the new Calflora tools for your native plant ventures and adventures by Cynthia Powell. But before we get to Cynthia's talk, we have another talk, and I'm going to introduce a few things first. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge that the work done by the Santa Clara Valley chapter of CNPS lies in the homeland of the Mokelumne River, the Ama Mutsun tribal band, the Tamiya Nation, and the Ramayatush Ohlone. They still live and thrive in this area today, and we hope to learn from them and support their work to restore traditional practices and heal from historical trauma. If this happens to be your first talk, we would love to know how you found out about us and where you are. So if you're comfortable with it, please share that in chat. And it doesn't matter if you're on YouTube or on Zoom, we are monitoring in both places. And these talks are not a one-person deal. We actually always have a team. Tonight, I'm taking care of the technology and hosting duties. Judy Finnerty is our QA moderator, and Kelvin Liu, who is actually home for spring break, was kind enough to join us as our YouTube moderator. And we have two speakers, Annie Taylor and Cynthia Powell. If you are not familiar with the California Native Plant Society, we are a nonprofit environmental organization that was founded in 1965. We have, I have not updated my slide. We have over 11,000 members in 35 chapters, and they are spread all over California and actually beyond the borders of the state and the country, because we also have a Baja California chapter. Our chapter is the Santa Clara Valley chapter, which covers all of Santa Clara County, as well as southern San Mateo. And CNPS's mission is to save California's native plants and their habitats, and we do that by bringing together science, education, and conservation and gardening. If you are not currently a member of CNPS, we would love to have you join us to help support this very important movement. And when you become a member, you get a lot of extra benefits in addition to just supporting the great work that CNPS does. You'll receive not just one, but two journals, Artemisia, which is our science-focused journal, and then Flora, which is a wonderful general interest magazine about California native plants, gardening, and other really interesting articles. You'll also get our chapter newsletter, The Blazing Star, which tells you about our events and as well as has interesting articles of local interest. You'll receive discounts at participating local nurseries and more. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can, if you've got a QR code reader, just point it at the screen and you'll be taken to the place you can join, or go to cnps.org/join and you can sign up online. And I'm sorry this slide is so sparse. We normally have several talks every month, but we are gearing up for our extremely busy season in April. And so right now, the only thing we have scheduled is our March photo group meeting, which is going to be on Friday, March 25th. If you are a photographer or if you just like to look at pretty pictures, it is open for everybody. Photographers can join the group and sign up to share their pictures. It's a lot of fun, so if you're interested in doing that, please consider it. And if you want to find out what our other activities are, you can find that out on our website, cnps-scv.org, or our meetup group, meetup.com. And you can also join our chapter news mailing list, which I will explain on another slide. I will say that if you want to find out as events are scheduled, because we do sometimes have pop-up events, joining up our meetup group is the best way to stay immediately informed as things are scheduled. So I would encourage doing that if you haven't already. One of the reasons there aren't other things scheduled is because we have very exciting, our garden tour coming up in person again for the first time in 2 years on April 2nd and 3rd. On Saturday, the April 2nd, you'll have the Northern Gardens, and on Sunday, April 3rd, the Southern Gardens. And you just have to go to gngt.org to register. It's completely free, and it's a self-guided tour, so you'll get a map and you can go and visit the gardens on those 2 days. It's a wonderful event. I hope you guys will consider attending. Oops, I did not update this slide as well. We do also have a chapter nursery, which has an online store, and it is not open through Monday, February 14th. In fact, we just closed. We are open the first 2 weeks of each month. So right now it is closed through the end of March, but it will reopen again at the beginning of April. And you just go to our nursery store. The URL is there, or you can get it through that QR code, or you can simply go to cnps-scb.org, and it's right there on the top page. You can place your orders online, and then you can either have them delivered if you live between Belmont and San Jose, or you can schedule a time to come by our nursery to pick your plants up. We have more than just plants. We also have t-shirts, books, and other items, and we are always adding more plants even as the store is open. And all the proceeds go to support our chapter. It's the primary way our chapter supports itself, so we appreciate anything that you purchase from us. It helps us to keep these events going. And as I mentioned before, one of the best ways to find out what's going on is to be on our chapter news mailing list. We get if you join that list, you get an email once a week just to let you know what's coming up. And it's very easy to join. It's a Google group, so you simply send email to this rather long email address at the end of the slide. You can find that address by going to cnps-scb.org, and it's right there on the front page. So you don't have to worry about writing it down really quick right now. And finally, a bit of housekeeping. I am actually going to hit the mute all button just in case anyone is not muted right now, but do please keep your microphones off. If you have any questions for either of our speakers, feel free to type them into the chat. We have people monitoring the chat on both YouTube and on Zoom. And at the end of each talk, your questions will be read to the speakers, and you'll be able to get your answers. So we are going to be starting out with Annie Taylor, who is the recipient of the 2021 Sally Casey Scholarship. She is at UC Berkeley, where she is working on the impacts of controlled and cultural burning on diversity and abundance of the Amah-Mutsun food and medicinal plants in Central California. So she is partnering with the Amah-Mutsun tribal band to study this. And Annie, I am going to turn it over to you now to give us an update.
Great. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thanks for having me. I'm going to quickly get my screen share set up. Oh, I'm on a different slide. How's this look?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to have this chance to talk with you all tonight, and I'm looking forward to your questions and feedback, and also to Cynthia's presentation. So I'll give a brief overview of my work and dive deeper into the research that was funded through the Sally Casey Scholarship. So as a means of introduction, again, I'm a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley. I'm in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management, and all of my dissertation work relates back to this concept, the ecological impacts and revitalization of Amah-Mutsun stewardship. So background on how I got here. Oh, it's saying my internet is unstable. Am I back?
You're back, but you might as well turn off your video, I think, at this point.
Okay, yeah, it'll help the connection. I'm sorry about that. So, all right, everyone can still hear me? It's still good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for being patient with the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry about that. So some background on how I got here. My background is a mix of ecology, geospatial analysis, and computer programming. I was a biology major in undergrad, and I was always trying to find ways to mix in mapping and programming whenever possible. So in my thesis research, I analyzed spatial patterns of pine mortality on Santa Cruz Island, which is an island down south in the Channel Islands of California. And I was very lucky to get to live on the island for a few weeks through a partnership with the Nature Conservancy. And after graduation, my collaborators there actually hired me on to expand on that research. And together we looked at 45 years of satellite imagery to compare how the recent die-off from our most recent drought ending in 2017 compared to a similar event in the early 90s. And so we published this work, and I began to think about graduate school for the first time. And during this time, I was also working as a GIS analyst for a local conservation organization that some of you are likely familiar with. This is Peninsula Open Space Trust, or POST. And I loved this role because I hugely enjoyed the GIS component. GIS, I use that interchangeably with mapping. So if you catch me doing that, that's what I mean. And I also saw how spatial science was incredibly important for making informed decisions in the applied conservation space. So I got hooked on that. So I came into my graduate studies with a love for this applied conservation work and this suite of skills. And I was thrilled to form a partnership with Alexi Sigona, who is another PhD student in my department and a member of the Amamutsan tribal band. And so together we launched a research collaboration with his tribe that combines his skills in social science with mine in GIS and ecology. So the Amamutsan tribal band's homelands are here in Central California, south of the San Francisco Bay and east of Monterey Bay. And the tribe founded the Amamutsan Land Trust in 2013, which works to steward the lands that are shown here on the map. So you can see that dotted outline area is their stewardship area. So Alexi and I have built this collaborative research project through almost 3 years of discussions with tribal leadership, researchers associated with the tribe, and the Land Trust. And at the beginning of our PhD research, we conducted 12 in-depth interviews with tribal members, which helped to align our work from the outset with the priorities of the community. So just a bit about the tribe and the Land Trust. They're doing incredible work to steward ecosystems and protect sacred sites throughout their homelands. And many studies have highlighted the critical importance of Indigenous stewardship for maintaining healthy ecosystems throughout California. And in particular, California's coastal grasslands historically depended on frequent fire. And they are now one of the most endangered ecosystems in the US and have experienced one of the most dramatic ecological invasions globally. And conversely, the foodways, the ceremonies, and the medicines of the Amamutsan tribal band depend on relationships with these native coastal grasslands. So this mutual dependence between cultures and ecosystems is captured in what Robin Wall Kimmerer calls reciprocal restoration. And one example of this reciprocal restoration is the Land Trust Cultural Burning Program shown in the photo on the left. So the tribe and the Land Trust are doing so much more exciting work than I could talk about today, but I've put their websites up on the slide as well for anyone to learn more, and I encourage you to do that. So this idea of reciprocal restoration, broadly speaking, is what encompasses all of my dissertation work. So I'm working to try to understand, work towards this reciprocal restoration of Amamutsan cultures and native ecosystems. So my role in their work is to bring the power of geospatial analysis and mapping tools to support and guide their stewardship. So I'm also working to provide recommendations for the many land managers in this area who may or may not have existing relationships with the tribe. So far, I'm only in my third year, but I have only 2 research projects with the tribe. The first is to map and model the abundance of food and medicine plants throughout that stewardship area I showed you. And the second is to compare the biodiversity of cultural plants on these coastal grasslands that are managed with and without fire. And I'm going to be talking about that second project today because that's the work that was funded by this chapter. And I think you'll find it really interesting. So this project started with these 2 main questions, and they're both related to a very unique part of the San Mateo coast. The first is asking how the diversity and abundance or amount of cultural plants varies between areas with different fire management. And the second is ask how that fire management impacts things like shrubs, as well as invasive plants in this area. So this is our very special incredibly unique site on the San Mateo coast. You can see in this little inset map, we're down at Año Nuevo State Park, which is north of Santa Cruz and south of Pescadero. So these coastal grasslands, which you're seeing here in this main map, offer us a completely unique and very rare opportunity to compare the biodiversity of an area that's been frequently burned to adjacent areas that have not been burned or actively managed. So this grassland in the middle, shown in orange, is known as Cascade Field. This area is known as Franklin Point, just in case folks know those names. This orange area has undergone controlled burning every 2 years from the 1980s to the present. And then the grassland immediately south, shown in red, was burned in the CZU complex fire in August 2020. So the most recent controlled burn was November 2020, which is very comparable to the CZU wildfire. And then this area to the north has no recorded fire in the last 100 years, this area in blue. So this is an awesome opportunity to compare how these different types of fire management have impacted the plant communities there. And in particular, I'm working with the tribe to understand how these fire histories have impacted the cultural plant biodiversity and abundance. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say there. I love this image. This is just from Google Earth, an image captured soon after the CZU wildfire. And this is zooming in on that area, and you can see how the prescribed or controlled burn scar looks here versus that wildfire fire scar, which is much darker on the right side of the screen. And it's really exciting. State Parks owns this land and has been burning it since the 80s. But they've gotten involved with the Amamutsan Land Trust and have been burning it in partnership with tribal members for the last maybe 5 or so years. So it's a really awesome partnership. And there are really two components of this work. So full disclosure, all of this work is planned for this spring. And I'm really excited to get your feedback because I can incorporate it into my analysis. So first I'll talk about the fieldwork component of answering those questions. That's primarily going to be a big survey of each of these 3 sites. So at each site, I'll throw down 50 or so plots, and at each plot, I'll be estimating percent cover of a whole list of species, which is based on conversations with my partners at the tribe, as well as with state parks. And so it'll allow us to compare abundance and biodiversity of these key plants across the 3 fire management types. And will also I can use GIS or mapping to compare some of the environmental factors that play a large role in plant diversity. So things like soil types, elevation, other factors like that really determine whether a plant can grow in a certain place, regardless of fire. And the other big component of this study is the remote sensing component. So remote sensing in this instance refers to the use of satellite imagery to study a place over space and time. And so I get really excited about this stuff. This is what I've been doing for a couple of years. I'm not as experienced in the field, so please send me your well wishes for that. And so on the right, I've included a little video that shows you the power of satellites. So this is MODIS imagery, which is coarser pixels, but it's showing you the greenness of the Bay Area over the course of our most recent water year. So you can really see all the vegetation green up and brown out. And this is to give you a feel for what I'll be able to look at this site. In particular, we have an image of the entire Earth captured every 2 weeks, going back to 1972. So this is an incredible 50-year archive showing us how our ecosystems have transformed over time. So, and this imagery is known as Landsat imagery, and I'll use that to compare how the vegetation recovery from the most recent controlled burn differs from that of the wildfire. And you can see there's a lot of different questions we can answer with that data set. We can also compare how grassland recovery from each burn has changed over time and how regrowth differs during the first year post-fire versus the second year or the third year. And there's not a lot of work done to understand recovery trajectories of grasslands following controlled burns. There's not a lot of controlled burning of grasslands happening There's not enough research on that burning. And so we're really excited, all the partners at state parks and at the tribe, we're excited to see what this can reveal about this area and what it could tell us about how to guide our controlled burning program moving forward, and hopefully expanding it to more areas to bring back this really incredible ecosystem. So to close this out, this research is really important for a number of reasons, and I'm really grateful to have the support of CNPS. As I said, California's coastal grasslands are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the US, and they've historically depended on this Indigenous stewardship. So it's really imperative for ecologists like me to partner collaboratively and equitably with Indigenous communities to steward these ecosystems, both for biodiversity and also for resilience. I'm hoping that these partnerships can expand out to include many landowning agencies. So we're hoping that this study can be a bridge to start discussions around management recommendations, maybe regarding sensitive gathering areas, or where to avoid herbicide application, or the most suitable times a year to conduct mowing or burning. And just to acknowledge that this work builds upon the tribe's ecological knowledge and millennia-long relationships with these food and medicine plants. So to honor these relationships and the sovereignty of the Amamutsan, I'm keeping all of the culturally sensitive information within the community, within the Amamutsan community, and keeping it confidential. So I would love to talk more about the other steps that Alexi and I took, both initially and also continue to take to partner in a good way with the tribe, because I know that there are more and more examples of scientists trying to do that. And so I'll end with gratitude for all of these folks who have partnered with me or supported my work. Definitely you all for hearing me out today. Thank you to CNPS for the funding and the support. And lots of gratitude to the tribe for their partnership and the interview participants who really guided my dissertation from the start. So yeah, that's all. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Annie. We got a couple questions. So first of all, what are some of their cultural plants? I think we noted some yampa at the end there, but did you have any specifics, or I don't know if you shared those?
Yeah, I'm still working with the tribal leadership to understand, is it okay to share the names of the plants versus, maybe just not data about the plants. But I can tell you a few of the ones that I can share. One of the plants that you can probably see in this picture, this is a picture of the burned area I think it was December following the November burns. It's already, all this green is popping up. And one of the plants that we keep seeing pop back up really quickly post-fire is soaproot. And so soaproot is a really awesome cultural plant. You can eat the bulb sort of like a potato. And then also the bulb is surrounded by this really hairy, rough, coarse material that can be used in a lot of different ways, including as a brush. And then as the name implies, you can use the bulb uncooked as a form of soap. So that's one example of a plant that we are anecdotally really only seeing in the area that's burned here and not in the adjacent areas. So that's really exciting. Yeah.
Great. Will you be only sampling for one season? Or
this is a great question, because there are so many plants that don't show up every year. And so we'll be missing some species if we only sample once. So my plan is to sample just this first year, and then ideally get funding and partnerships to hand this project over to the tribe, a project that the Native Stewardship Corps, which is a piece of the Amamutsan Land Trust, to own and lead moving forward if it's something that they're excited about. And I know state parks would love that. They're underfunded, but they would love to see this data collected every year.
That's great. So on the satellite images, how granular can you make out? Can you make out different kinds of plants, or not native and non-native grasses, or what can you see?
This is a really great question. There's a lot of work in the satellite imagery methods, community, trying to understand if you can get down to species level distinguishing. And so far the answer is you can't do it well. So I definitely wouldn't want to, especially with the coarser pixels of the Landsat imagery, I'm not going to be able to see individual species, but I'll be able to extract certain seasonal signatures. So things like what day does it reach its max greenness? And there can be broad strokes comparisons between these types of seasonal signatures to understand, this grassland maybe is likely to be more invasive dominant than this grassland. Mm-hmm. I will say all three sites are very much invaded. So that's sort of why the survey is focusing on cultural plants, and we're not trying to do a survey of every species. First, because I'm not qualified to do that. Right. There are so many experienced botanists with decades of work who would be qualified. I'm not one of them. So, but the other reason is that it's really invaded. We're trying to understand, sort of picking the needles out of the haystack here.
Great. So you anticipate finishing up, just last question, you anticipate finishing up in a couple of years or?
Yeah, I'll be done with the field work definitely this spring. Mm-hmm. Hopefully writing up this work in the summer and submitting it to you all at CNPS, and then hopefully to the public in the fall. That's my optimistic schedule.
That'll be great. We look forward to seeing the finished product when it's available. So awesome. Thanks very much, Annie. That was great. Thanks for coming in tonight. Wi-Fi and all. All right.
Yep. Thanks, Annie. Really appreciate it. That was a great talk, and your work is quite exciting. But I'm now going to introduce Cynthia Powell. She is the Calflora's Executive Director. She graduated with her master's in GIS in 2010, forecasting the Mokelumne. Sorry, I'm totally mangling that.
Mokelumne. It's hard to say.
Mokelumne River water supply based on MODIS remote sensing snowpack images. And she's been examining what was under that snow, the plants, ever since. She coordinates all of Calflora's programs, research, outreach, and advocacy, as well as fundraising and management. She is truly an amazing person. I admire her greatly. She is incredibly helpful. And if you ever have a question about Calflora, Cynthia is just so incredibly accommodating. I personally love Calflora, and I am so happy that Cynthia is running it. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, Cynthia.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm happy to be here. If you have a pertinent question, Judy's going to ask as I'm on that subject. And if you have a less pertinent question, I'll answer those at the end. I wanted to just point out that Steve Rosenthal, who's one of your chapter members, has done a lot of work at Alum Rock over a decade or longer with a crew of volunteers who've been helping. And this is one of the photos that he took, I guess, while he was working there, or so I thought that I would share that with you. Tonight, based on there's a survey in the chat on Zoom where I'm asking people for feedback about what it is. How do you use Calflora? What would you like to learn about Calflora? What's useful? What's less useful? So if you want to fill in that survey still, that would still be helpful. But based on that, I generated this list of topics to go over tonight. Calflora basics, how to ID the plants you see. There's a lot of ways to do that, no one right way. And I think kind of combining ways is really useful. I'll talk about that. Obscuring rare plant locations, not obscuring rare plants themselves. The planting guide, plant lists. I just sent out an email today about Calflora's plant lists. And if you didn't receive that, that means you're not on our list. So please, I'll post my email here in a minute. You can let me know, or you can go to the Calflora homepage and register in the upper right. Then you'll be added to our email list. iNaturalist, which is one of the data feeds that we have in Calflora. And then at the end, your questions. So first of all, here's the Calflora team. We have a lot of developers. As a plant database, that's important to have people structuring the back end so that it's a useful interface, and so that you can share plant observations across jurisdictions, across boundaries. You can also share an obscured location. So somewhere in this area, you might find this rare plant, but I'm not going to tell you exactly where. Then we have Pete Fry, who's our weed manager software director. We have built out a software especially for tracking and managing invasive plants. It's called Weed Manager. And then I have my MS in GIS. Annie was talking about mapping and GIS, geographic information science. And so I've learned a lot about plants while I've been working at Calflora, but I'm not a botanist. So I sometimes mispronounce them, and I don't always know what I'm looking at. And I'm looking, mapping is one of my strengths here at Calflora. What is Calflora anyway? We are a 501c3 nonprofit plant database, and we provide information on wild California plants for conservation, education, and appreciation. This database, which is a website, calflora.org, contains over 10,000 native and introduced plant species. That's all wild plant species in the state of California. Now, if you are one of those people, and some of you probably are in this chapter, who discover new species, you let us know, hey, I discovered it, here's the publication about it, and then we add it to the database. We are not the nomenclature authority. We rely on Jepson for that, and USDA plants and CNPS. And when they disagree, which doesn't happen too often, then we try and maintain a neutral middle ground. So anyway, 10,000 plants. What else do we contain? Over 3.5 million plant location observations. That's points, lines, and polygons from dozens of data sources. So we pull them in to one place for users like you to be able to see what is the distribution of this plant, what are the characteristics, what are the associated pollinators with this species. And all of this comes from not just people who are using our phone app in the field, which is great, and I'll talk about that briefly also, and adding data to the database. That way you can enter surveys. A lot of CNPS chapters have entered checklists for specific areas. It's a survey into Calflora. And we have national forests, state parks, county parks, regional parks, iNaturalist, CCH specimens. And there's a long list on the website if you want to know more about what those data sources are. Why would you have a polygon representing a plant location? People sometimes ask. When I used to do live presentations, I would sometimes ask for the audience to answer this question. Since it's virtual, I'll go ahead and answer my own question. If you have a large area of where a species grows at a certain percent cover that you can estimate, you can say, in this polygon, we have about 20% cover of goat grass or invasive or native plant. As you know, plant names change, and we are not the authority, as I mentioned, but we crosswalk, that's the verb, old names and new names together. So whatever name you might have learned when you were learning about plants, mimulus, you can search for it by the old name or the new name, use the type ahead so you don't actually have to remember how to spell it, and find the species you're looking for. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Calflora serves over 300,000 plant photos. Some of those come from you guys, as you saw, and you'll see a few more. They are often from observations in the database, but not always. We have about 80,000 unique e-visitors each month. That's gone up in the past 2 years since COVID. And about 4,000 active data contributors, and I know many of you fall into that category. The Calflora database contains all 10,000 plus native and introduced species. That's all wild plant species in the state. We receive many data feeds from other sources, CCH, filtered iNat, etc. As important as what we are is what are we not? We are not part of the UC system, although since we serve CalPhotos, which is part of the UC system, people often think we are. We're not part of CalPhotos. They are part of the UC system. We're not part of the California Invasive Plant Council. That's a separate nonprofit. And we're not part of CNPS, which is, as most of you know, as chapter members of CNPS, that's its own nonprofit also. So we've been a 501c3 since 2000. Our funding comes from 3 main sources: Weed Manager, which is invasive plant software, fee-for-service work, and donations, including from your chapter. Thank you very much. Here is an example of our kind of bread and butter. This is what people come to Calflora for. They come to Calflora for these taxon report pages, plant profile pages. Here's an example of California huckleberry. You have the scientific name, the author, the common names. Is it a shrub? Is it native? Are there any pests and pathogens associated with it? We built a cal-invasive pest and pathogen database also. Can look at distribution by watershed. And there's one taxon report page for each wild plant species in the state. So that's a lot. As I mentioned, we're not the nomenclature authority. We don't want to be the nomenclature authority. We want other people to make those decisions about what is the current name, what does the DNA tell us about clumping and splitting different species. So here, for an example, you'll find on this taxon report page for this erythranthe alternate names. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alternate names that all crosswalk. As I mentioned, that's the verb that we use, crosswalk back to this erythranthe. Beautiful photo. I should have given credit for that photo. Don't remember who that came from. Might have been one of you. In addition, on our taxon report pages, we have nursery and seed sources for the natives, of course, not the non-natives. So for instance, this verbena can be found at CNPS Santa Clara Valley Nursery. What do you know? And other places. So for any species that you're looking for, you can check and see where you might find starts or seeds for that species. Here, I want to do a few shout outs to some chapter members for their reference photos. Reference photos are what you find on the taxon report pages, the plant profile pages, which have these. This is a sort of, I don't know, watered down, or just I picked a few items out of the taxon report page to show here. And it shows the distribution on the map. It looks like there's one in the Farallon Islands. Oh, that's interesting. You always wonder when they're flying out into the ocean, what's going on. And Steve Rosenthal's photo here, a great photo. And we have a team of 30 volunteers who are selecting, or about 30-ish, maybe 40 now, selecting these reference photos, finding the best one. It's not static, it's constantly changing, and adding them to these taxon report pages. If that's something that would interest you, it's as little or as much time as you'd like to put into it, and we are seeking volunteers for reference photos. Tony Corelli, also in your chapter. Here we have some of this cotton batting plant observations bleeding over into Nevada, which is normal. We do accept observations outside the state, and if it's close enough to the border, they do show up on the taxon report pages. Oh, Vivian, golden eardrops with, you might not be able to see it, but there's a little hummingbird there. And one of those blue dots is Vivian. So every time you add a photo to Calflora, or an observation without a photo, which is also allowed, you get a blue dot to yourself. And then people can click on it and say, oh, Vivian, look what she saw, and look at her pictures, and she can write any notes about the golden eardrops, where she saw them. Well, it's on the map where it was, but any location description she might want to add, or notes. Here's another Steve Rosenthal, gorgeous willow herb. Allium, wow, Steve, look at you go. Some incredible photos. Stella Yang, also a chapter member, this Clarkia. D. Himes, this nice Santa Clara thorn mint. Now you'll notice for this thorn mint that there's some yellow squares on the map in addition to those blue dots. That's because this, and if you saw the whole taxon report page, you would see that this is a rare plant. You might know that already anyways. And for the rare plants, there are some observations that are obscured, and I'm going to go more into detail about what that is in a minute. But So when you see those yellow quads, it probably means we got those from CNDDB. Let's see, the California Natural Database. And that's a state database for rare plants specifically, and we get a data feed from them also with the observations that are obscured because they're rare. Natural Diversity Database, California Natural Diversity Database. Okay, so that's Calflora basics. Now let's talk about how to ID the plants that you see. There's no one right way, depends on you, depends on what you like to do, depends on if you're, you like to use your phone in the field, some people really don't. And how much you know already about it. Do you know the genus and not the species? So let's go to Chrome or to my browser here. Do you see my browser? Or do you still see? Yes, great. Okay. Here we are. Zoom in a little bit on the calflora.org homepage. And let's go, since I was recently at Alum Rock with some of your chapter members and looking at some of Steve's crew's great work out there, let's go to what grows here. Because well, we all saw an Amsycnia, and we weren't sure which kind it was. So, okay, let me slow down. Sometimes I have to tell myself to slow down. From the homepage, there's all these hyperlinks, these quick links on the left. I found what grows here and clicked on it. And then I'm going to look specifically at Alum Rock. So I start typing, and there's a bunch of them. And this is the one that I want, park. The map zooms in to that location. Zoom in a little bit more. And now here's something, it's a little bit new on Calflora called layers. And under layers, you can look at county lines, you can look at streams. Let's just turn those off. And then under region, you can look at county again, you can look at protected area, CNPS chapter, Jepson eFlora, geographic subdivision, Jepson region, zip code, ecoregion 4, ecoregion 3, and watershed. And under grid, you can see quads and quarter quads. And then under climate, lot under climate, and under soil, pH, salinity, depth, texture, calcium carbonate, serpentine. This stands for, I think, available water. I don't know, something with water. My favorite layer to use is protected area, like the one I just turned on. And then if you click on here, you'll see CPAD, California Protected Area Database, Alum Rock. And if you click over here, it's actually Sierra Vista Open Space Preserve. So I want to make sure that I'm in Alum Rock, in selected background. And under plant filter, we could say, let's look at all the natives that grow in Alum Rock. Okay, 191. Fold up the map. Here's where I got that number from. And you can group them by life form if you'd like to. You can scroll through. Here's the bloom wheels. And we saw, let's narrow it down a little. Amsycnia. Search again. All right, so in Alum Rock, there are two. We have the common fiddleneck, intermedia, and then Menziesii. I don't know how to pronounce that one. One record, and they're both native. Neither one is rare. I doubt what we saw was rare because it's kind of all over the place. So, and Steve actually suspects that it's intermedia. Let's just look. I'm going to display the 3 records in Alum Rock of this intermedia, and I'm going to make them yellow squares, display those. And then for this one record of the other one that's not intermedia, I'll make it purple just to make it different. So now can compare those dots to where I was, can also look and see who said that. 1907, oh my gracious. Well, that was location quality low. So, and the observer, this is from our specimen data feed, our CCH2 data feed, which means that it was probably correctly ID'd, because the specimens are generally pretty well ID'd. But for the older records, the location is questionable sometimes, although location description says Alum Rock Park. But given that there are 3 of this intermedia, and Steve suspected that what we saw was intermedia, so that's one of his. Oh, that's one of mine. It's actually, I already decided it was it was this one, because this was when I was there. And then there's one more. Get down to the details. Another one from Steve. All right, let's look at record detail for one of these. He saw it in 2021, December, at Weather Loop. Yeah. All right, so that's one way, and to help you identify what you might have seen. Now that's kind of assuming that you are able to get it down to the genus level. You can use the Seek app if you want. That helps get down to the genus level. The Calflora app is not a duplication of iNaturalist or of the Seek app. It's mostly used to take photos in the field. You can leave the species as unknown and figure it out later, but it's a way to add data to the database. Now, another way to figure out what this is to go to my observation. Oops, that's Steve. Where did mine go? Is mine right here? Yeah. Go to my observation and put it in a group called, edit it, put it in a group called, I'm in a lot of groups, so don't be overwhelmed by this long list, Plant ID Help Group. And then I would save it if I really wanted to do that. I don't necessarily want to do that because I'm pretty sure I got it right, and I don't want to, post this out to the group, since it's not such a huge burning question in my mind. But if it were, I would definitely put it in the group. Calflora groups are a way to share observations with people who have similar interests as you. There's, as you can see, we have Mount Tam State Park, Lawson CNPS chapter has a group. Other CNPS chapters have groups. Marin County Parks, we have, tons of groups with special interests, and they share their data. And even if you don't publish it, if you leave your observation as unpublished, which is how it comes into Calflora, which is also different from iNaturalist, which is published right away for prime time. If you leave it as unpublished or private, or if you obscure the location, then people in your group, right now it's an independent, which is no group, but in your group can still see it. So that's important to keep in mind. All right, so there's a lot of other ways to ID plants that you've seen. Other than what I just said, those are just a few ideas. Go to the place where you were on the map and look at what's there. You can do this in the field. What grows here has a little blue dot showing you where you are, and then what grows around you, and that can be really helpful. I also like to load observations into, I'll show you what I mean. Observation search at this location. I'm going under tools here. You can send someone a printable version of this page, create a plant list out of it, location profile telling you about the precipitation and the soil type and everything at this location. I'm going to go to observation search, back it out, and then you can add everything from your query to your phone, and then you can go and follow the dots. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now. It's another way to ID plants in the field, is to go to other known observations and find them again. And since Calflora has so many data feeds from so many sources, there's a lot of depth to the data available. Okay. So from current slide, oops.
Cynthia, while you're changing your thing, one question is, could you, we assume that you want sightings found in wild areas and not necessarily in landscaping, is that right?
Great question. You can actually, I'll just go back in here and show that as you're editing your record, you can say planted. So if this had been planted by Steve and his group, or anybody, I can say, let's see, natural status. Where's natural status? Here it is. Natural status, planted garden or planted restoration site. And I've encouraged Steve specifically, and some other people too, although I haven't really made a big announcement about it, maybe I should, that if you have good photos, if they're of your garden or of a restoration site, please do add them. Just note that they're planted so they don't mess up our algorithms for wild plants. And that way we can use the photos on taxon report pages, because a lot of those garden photos I've seen coming actually from your chapter specifically are incredible. And to be able to use those on the taxon report pages would be really valuable. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you.
Okay, so from current slide, well, now it's showing on my other screen. Oh, here, display settings, swap. There we go. I don't think we were there quite yet. Goodness, it's zoomed way ahead. Okay, so we did look at all these gorgeous photos, and none of, I don't actually remember if any of these photos from these taxon report pages were planted. Doesn't look like D's here. Well, you never know. That could be somebody's garden, but if they were, they're still useful as reference photos. How to ID plants you see. Okay, obscuring rare plants. I looked at some observations in your chapter region, and here's the legend about what the colors mean. So this is just a search, a specific region. I think I had a date, a start date and an end date, just to see what's going on in this area botanically. And there's some quads, which means there's some rare plants in there that are only showing up they're showing up with the location obscured. Specimens, those blue circles, are coming from CCH. Lines or polygons, there's one little pink one right by South San Jose that's kind of covered up by some purple right now. That means that it's a line or a polygon. Obscured point, so the blue, dark blue square means obscured point. And first, usually it's a rare plant. It could also be on private property. The observer has opted not to share the exact location. Let's look at one of those. Vicky, who I know is your chapter member, I had the opportunity to meet her, decided that this Dudleya exact location shouldn't be shared with a broader audience, which is wise, and obscured it. So that's why it's blue, and you can still go into, if we were live on the Calflora website, not on my static presentation, we could go and look at her record detail, see her photos, see any descriptions or notes that she added, but we would not be able to see exactly where it was. Now, Vicky maintains access to the exact lat long, the exact location where she was. That's in her Calflora account, but observers looking in who aren't in her group, I don't know if she shared this Dudleya with a group or not, but if you're not in her group, you won't be able to see exactly where it was. And that's important for protecting rare plants from being poached, and also protecting private property in terms of property value and things like that. All right, now let's move on to the planting guide. Go back into Chrome. So from the home page, let's close some of these tabs. And do let me know if I'm going too fast. I tend to just zoom around in here and go a little bit quickly. Here we are at calflora.org, the home page. I am signed in. So I get, when you're signed in, you have access to your observations, your profile, your groups, comments on your records, comments you've made, your preferences, your searches, any email alerts. If you want to know, I want to know when Steve Rosenthal adds anything to Calflora, or I want to know when a rare plant is added to Santa Clara. You can set up an email alert for that. Your plant lists, which I'll go over in a minute, and your shapes. And from here, you can go to the planting guide. Now, will someone, let's see, type into the chat either an address or a cross street or an area for planting? It can be a restoration site or a garden. And then I can get that out of the chat. Oh, yes. All right, I'm watching the chat, to the Zoom chat, to see what location you guys are interested in. If nobody types anything, I'll just go to a place that I think is interesting.
So you could say like Ulistac Preserve in Santa Clara. I don't know the address.
Okay, how do you spell it?
Ulistac.
Ulistac Preserve.
Natural area, I think it is.
Natural area
In Santa Clara.
Oh yeah, found it. Cool. All right, so based on that location, is it low water?
It's a semi-restored. It's a semi-restored kind of semi-garden, semi-well area.
Okay, so not low water. Is it? It looks like it might be riparian. Is it?
Not entirely.
No.
No,
Okay.
it's a planted sort of butterfly demonstration garden.
And shade?
Sure.
Okay, those restrictions were a little bit tight. So let's uncheck some of these. We're not going to say
suggestion for a neighborhood. Actually,
okay.
This is if you want to try a different place. Let's put in Henrietta Avenue, Sunnyvale. Someone suggested.
Okay.
This Ulistac's kind of a unique place. So
okay. Well, when I unchecked restricting the results to the same ecoregion, the same county within 10 miles, none of these, you do not, please, Calflora algorithm, do not use soil factors to choose plants. Do not omit plants at the edges of their tolerances, and do not give me plants that are only easy to establish. Got 179. And you can ungroup by life form, fold up the map, scroll through this. You can share this with your friends. You can share this with your landscape architect, this list. And then if you want to know why these showed up, like if you're wondering about this Buckeye, let's just look. Location suitability. So Buckeye tolerates 0 to 2,000 meters. The location is only 2 meters, so that makes sense. Precipitation is close to the lower end of what the plant tolerates. And the location, well, the location has 15 inches of precipitation a year on average. Of course, recently it's been lower. Buckeye tolerates 13 to 91, wet season, temperature range, soil, pH, etc. So that's why this showed up on our list. Now we can also look at taxon report for this species, see where it grows in the state, the photos, toxicity, habitat, communities, and then also is CNPLX, which shows which nurseries have Buckeye, where you can find it. Here we are, CNPS Santa Clara Valley. Now let's do the other location. So if we want to start fresh, go to the homepage, go to the planting guide. Okay, what was the other one, Judy?
Henrietta Avenue in Sunnyvale.
Henrietta Avenue, Sunnyvale. Does that look like Henrietta Avenue? There it is. All right. So who knows Henrietta? Is it low water, riparian, shady? Doesn't look riparian, that's for sure. It's probably low water.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what it gives us. So 88 plants without changing the default settings, which are checking for wild plants in the same ecoregion, using soil factors, and omitting plants at the edges of their tolerances. We can look at them annual herbs only, fold up the map. The butterfly indicates pollinator. Oh, look, this is just the fiddleneck we were looking at earlier. Menziesii. Let's see if that's possible to buy nearby. Looks like LA. Not exactly nearby. It's interesting, it suggested this fiddleneck, but not the intermedia. Wonder why that is.
There's
Could
not a lot
be.
of natural areas around that site until you get to the bay, probably. Sunnyvale.
And so if you wanted to go to tools, you can send this list as an email, you can download it as a spreadsheet, and you can go to what grows here in the Seco region. And that'll show you more about what grows there.
Can you do those if you're not signed in? You have to be signed in.
Good question. Let's sign out. Okay, so we're still on Henrietta Avenue. Same criteria, same 88 plants. Tools, nope. Good question, huh? So there's some things you can do without being signed in, like you can look at the location profile for Henrietta Avenue. Here's the elevation in feet and meters for those of us who think in meters and centimeters and precipitation, temperature range, etc. Soil, non-saline, no calcium carbonate. And if you have a question about what is this available water or something or other thing that Cynthia mentioned, you can click on it. Available water storage. Okay. Volume of water that the soil to a depth of 100 centimeters can store that is available to plants. So if you're just wondering what any of this stuff means, you can click on it and find out. And then, as Judy mentioned, once you're signed in, refresh the page, and then send as an email, download spreadsheet, etc. All right, any questions about the planting guide?
Yes. How do you update nursery information or report that nurseries have closed?
Did your CNPS nursery close?
No, I'm saying
no,
just
in general. Okay, good.
Right.
You can, that would be bad. You can send us an email and we will update it. Okay. There's got to be a better way, but that's the way we do it right now. You can send a spreadsheet or a PDF or something.
And which email would that be? Will be support?
Yes, good question. If you're going to email us, if you have a question, if you're sending us a spreadsheet, that's great, or a list. But if you have a question, for instance, about the planting guide and the results here, take this URL or link at the top, copy it, and then go to Calflora, go to contact Calflora. Here's our email address, and then paste it into your email so that we can better assist you. People say, I was using the planting guide and I thought it was just, my results, I was puzzled. Well, which result puzzled you? Can you please send a link? Is that way we can assist you better. And to send any nursery updates, this is also our email address for that. There's a bunch of people who receive mail at this address, and then we divvy it up appropriately.
Great.
Okay, so that was the planting guide. Any other questions about the planting guide?
Not specifically.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I have a new one came in.
Yep.
What data is used when you check the soil statement in the guide?
Okay, planting guide, soil specifically. Let's go to help. Every Calflora application has a tools, and every Calflora application under tools has a help, and most of them have a video. So if you forget what I said and you're having trouble, you can always watch this little short video. Soils, find soil. All right, so the question is, where does the soil information come from? Soil conditions, soil caveats. I just put soil in the search here to find how many plants tolerate each soil pH, more criteria. Where does our soil map layer help? That's here. Find soil. Soil salinity comes from soil texture, Goodness gracious, this is more detail than probably most people were hoping for. But for those of you who really want a lot of detail, it's here. So the ultramafic, the serpentine area soil layer comes from USGS. The rest comes from Surgo. And Surgo, you know, you can Google it. I forgot what it stands for.
We had a related question. Can you locate serpentine soil sites on Calflora? Not like what is the
Yes,
site here, but if I want to go looking for a serpentine, how do I do that?
Yes, I love doing that. Calflora, it's one of my favorite things. Actually, someone from Milo Baker is leading a serpentine hike, and I was just looking in their chapter to see where exactly it is. Any map you can go to observation search, for instance. And my preference, since I live in the East Bay, that's why it always jumps to the East Bay. You can, if you're signed in, set your maps to always jump to your area of interest. So let's turn on serpentine. Oh, and let's make it a little bit bolder. Darker background, outline, thick outline. And here's more about layers if you want to read more about Surgo. Back it out. There are the serpentine layers for the state, or the serpentine areas for the state. And these different colors indicate different eras of when the serpentine developed. And you can read more about that on about layers, right there. So if you wanted to go, if you're going up to, well, let's look in your chapter, see what you got for serpentine. Do you guys have some? Oh yeah, you have some serpentine. Is this in your chapter here?
Yes, but
Okay.
if you go a little bit to the west, I think near South San Jose, that's one of our biggest blocks right there, Coyote Ridge.
Oh yeah. Right, that one right there.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to see what grows, let's say in map area, knowing that that is serpentine, let's say native. And I could sort so we got 27 plants that, or 27 observations, not necessarily 27 species that grow in this map area that's also serpentine. And I'm going to click on the plant here to sort by plant name. I wonder, you know, when you look at the taxon report, it'll tell you if it's a serpentine plant specifically or not. I don't know off the top of my head if any of these are. So that one is not specifically.
The Circeum is.
This one?
Mhm. That's one of our rare plants.
Mount Hamilton thistle. Oh yeah, ultramafic affinity, strict endemic 5.9. Yep. Does that answer the question about serpentine?
I think so. Karen, if you need more information, just put it in the chat or unmute maybe.
Okay, so that was,
thank you.
oh good. That was the planting guide. And now from, oh no, not from beginning, sorry. Woo, see how much you remember of all I just went over. Does this all look familiar? Okay, rare plants, obscuring, that was Vicky's planting guide. How does it work? You put in a location and it, the planting guide algorithm, gives you a list of the native plants that would grow well there. To find matching plants, the Calflora algorithm matches plant tolerances with location values of the following factors. Oh gosh, I think I cut the slide out of all the factors accidentally. Yeah, I did. Sorry, you can find that under planting guide help if you want to see. It's really interesting. The location values that go into that algorithm. So now let's talk about plant lists and iNaturalist. I'm going to do both of those together. A plant list, go back to the homepage, calflora.org. I am signed in. So a plant list is something that's in your account. It belongs to you, and you can share it with your Calflora group if you want to, or you can just keep it for your own use. When you have a plant sale, or when your chapter has a plant sale, you can use your plant, like, oh, here's a Milo Baker plant sale list. All right, let's just look at this. If you don't have any plant lists, this page is not quite as full, and you can say make a new list. You can add one plant name at a time with the drop down to help you figure out how to spell these names. Or you can add a list of names here and it will correct your spelling, or actually it rejects your spelling if you're wrong. It doesn't correct it because it doesn't know what you mean until you get it right. And then you can figure out the right way by coming over here and starting to type. Then you save it. And once you've saved your plant list, then you can go to it. Oh, geez, cancel. And you can, so here's 81 plants that Milo Baker was selling in 2021. Look at the illustrated plant list. I think actually Vivian was the one who told me about this, that your chapter has been doing this for years. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I should suggest that to other chapters. And then other chapters started doing it as well. So you can, if you want the photos, you can include the photos. You can also say no photos. Display just as a list. You can group by family. And you can include all species and subspecies, which for a plant sale, you probably wouldn't want to do that. And then once you have it displayed how you want, you can take this URL and share it with people. You can print it out. You can use it in to look up observations of only the 81 plants that you're selling at your plant sale, for instance, to make sure that they all grow. I mean, I'm sure they do, but like to make sure they all actually grow in your county. And another way that I like to use plant lists is, let's see, Mount Diablo blooming in March. Okay. I'm going to go to observation search and say, these are my favorite plants on Mount Diablo that are blooming in March. Go to observation search and see where exactly they're growing. Like, how am I going to find all these plants that I want to see that bloom in March on Mount Diablo? And again, I'm going to use the layers, region, protected area, Mount Diablo in selected area. And here it has my Mount Diablo blooming in March. Search. There they are, all those dots, mostly purple. You guys remember our legend that we looked at earlier? Let's see where that is. So mostly simple points. We have a few specimens here. Nothing obscured. I think I don't have any rare plants on my list. And then we can fold up the map and scroll through and see which species from my list, some of those I actually observed, and where they are. So that's another way to use a plant list. Any questions about plant lists? My Calflora plant lists. You can use them to share with people, to share with your group, to query the database without doing just one species at a time, which takes a long time if you have a list of 12 that you're interested in.
I don't have any questions right now, but you did go over if can only the person who created the plant list update it? Is that?
Good question. If I think the answer is yes. Let's just check. So let's see. I will share my Milo Baker with another group. Let's see. Well, this isn't really going to answer the question, but I'll say that I want all wildflower seekers. I want them to be able to access this group. Can they edit it? They can, if you share an observation with your group, this is a little bit complicated about groups, but there's layers of access and layers. There's something called a data czar who can edit all the observations in a group if there is a data czar, which not every group has. So if you're a data czar, can you edit plant lists in the group? That's a question I don't know the answer to. I'm gonna have to look that up and get back to you. Good question.
Oh, we had a question. Do you have to do anything special to share the list with anyone with the link, to anyone with the link?
No, nothing special.
Okay.
Okay, iNaturalist. So let's go back to calflora.org homepage. Pulling in observations from iNaturalist is a way of adding observations to the Calflora database. We have a data pull from iNaturalist where we have, it's called an API, and we pull in a whole bunch of stuff, records, observations from iNaturalist into Calflora. Now, there are a lot of observations we don't actually want in Calflora from iNaturalist, so we only take research grade. We don't take anything that is planted, although we don't always know. If the observer has noted that it's cultivated, we don't take it. And then we have some other filters set up to try and get only the good stuff. Now, computer algorithms, are only so good at only getting the good stuff, and we probably miss some things that you might like to see. So you can go to add observations. And here's where you can add one record at a time. You can add a survey or a checklist, add records from iNaturalist. You can add your photos, and you can put multiple photos in a stack in one observation. And you can use Observer Pro, which is our phone app, to add observations to Calflora. So add records from iNaturalist. Does anybody have a handle that we should look up here? You can also just look for a name or within a region.
I don't know offhand if we have anybody. If anybody has an iNaturalist ID they want to put in the chat, we can look you up and see what you've got. Maybe people may not be willing to do this right now.
They don't want everybody to look at all their.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Let's look at Alum Rock then. Oh, I'm gonna need a little help. Where do I go? It's over here, right? Here it is, must be here. Yeah, this is it. Okay. So within Alum Rock,
We do have a volunteer for the iNaturalist handle.
Oh, okay. What is it?
So Assailant Steve. No G.
Okay. Assailant Steve. Okay, Steve, I'm gonna look you up in a minute. Let's first just see in this part of Alum Rock. There. Let's see if in map area there's any observations from iNat that are not yet in Calflora. Now, if it's already in Calflora, it won't show up here. Thinking.
I have a question myself. So if you are about this, so in iNaturalist, sometimes I'll go to Calflora, I'll see something is cultivated clearly, like usually things that I know are out of range for our county. I go to the iNaturalist observation, and sometimes it's listed as cultivated, not wild, and sometimes it isn't. But if it gets checked as cultivated, not wild in iNaturalist, and then you go and comment on it in Calflora, how does it get updated, or how long does that take? So,
oh, that's a great question. Every observation in Calflora has an owner or someone who's responsible for it. And if I pull in DJ's Poison Oak record into Calflora, I'm responsible for it. So if you go in and you see, well, obviously this is not going to be one, but you see something that was planted that came from iNaturalist that's in Calflora and you comment on it, I will receive an email. And this is true for any observation, whether it's from iNat originally or if it's a Calflora observation. If you comment on it and say, this is cultivated or the idea isn't right, I receive an email, and it's my responsibility to do something about it. And if I don't do anything about it for a week, then it gets thrown out of Calflora.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to add this is pretty harmless because there's a lot of poison oak there. To add this to Calflora, I'm going to go ahead and say add to Calflora. And now that's in Calflora. This one looks right to me too. I'll just go ahead and add this one. That's probably right. And you might know K. Martin. I don't, but I think that's probably right. The salvia, that might be, actually, it's right. That one might be planted. Or it's close to an area that looks like it might be planted. So now let's look up Steve's. Salin Steve, like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Only 2. And that doesn't mean Steve has only 2 records in iNat. It means there's 2 records he has in iNat that Calflora has not picked up yet. So let's add this one. Well, it'd be actually ideally, Steve, you would go in to Calflora and look your own handle up, and then you would pull these 2 in if you want them in Calflora, which I do. I think they look great. Because that way you own them. And if someone like Judy says that's cultivate or whatever, you know, if somebody has a comment on it, then it comes to you and not me because it's your observation. And you know, the iNaturalist data feed is never going to be perfect, but it has, I think, enhanced a lot of the data in Calflora. And because our filter is too tight rather than too loose, it also means we're missing some good stuff. So this is a way that you as a user, as an iNat user, or as a, you know, someone, if you know people who use iNat who you trust, you can help improve the data in Calflora by pulling in the good stuff. Okay, so I think that was my last. Yep, so now we're going to go to your questions.
I had a question. Can you link an iNaturalist handle to a Calflora username so auto pulls from iNaturalist will be assigned to the Calflora username?
That has been requested. We are scoping it, so it would require funding to build that, and it's a great idea.
Great. Vivian, did you have anything? We've run through a lot of questions already.
I didn't have anything specific, but I was actually going to say that I had an inspiration while Cynthia was talking, which is for plant tours, garden tours, using, you know, I love having the list for the nursery that we printed out, and it's really handy for people to look at it. And I'm thinking actually plant tours would have the same, or garden tours have the same thing, because it's so easy to make those lists. And then you have a printed one where, you know, people can get their hands on it. So I was actually going to suggest that I see at least one other person from our garden tour committee here, where we might explain how to do that, because it's such a quick and easy thing, making those lists.
That's such a good idea. And that's something else that never would have occurred to me. So I like having interaction with chapters and with you guys, because you're full of good ideas that I never would have thought of.
And I'm also very excited about the layers. I didn't know the thing about counties, and there are occasionally times where I have wanted to know about county boundaries while looking at the map, and lots of fun things to play with. I love your talk, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. I tried to get zip codes taken off of layers. This is like before the COVID, maybe 2 years ago. And so we took it off, and then we get this, you know, flood of emails. What happened to zip codes? I'm like, I don't know why you would be querying plants by zip code, a political, I don't know. But so we added it back. Yeah, and keep, you know, if you have things that you want changed or suggestions you have and upgrades, sending us an email with those ideas or letting us know how you use Calflora is really helpful.
Great. Well, thanks. Thanks, Cynthia. I don't have any other questions in the chat because we've been managing them as they come through, but I think it's been really helpful for me because I tend to fall into the same kind of repetition in my searches, and I think I need to be, this has sort of moved me another step forward. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that last call on questions, folks? Well, I think, well, it's actually very close to 9 as well. So maybe it is time to wrap up then. Okay, well, everybody, thank you for giving us the talk, Cynthia, and you've provided your information. And I will just personally say you're one of the most responsive people. So if anybody has questions, do reach out, because Cynthia and her team, they're pretty darn amazing about answering questions and actually making changes. People have good ideas. So I think this is it. And Annie, you're still here. Thank you so much for your presentation as well. I think it's been a wonderfully informative evening with lots of cool new things to learn about. So thank you to Cynthia and Annie. Thank you everybody for joining us. And sign up for our garden tour. You can actually see some of us in person, as well as lots of beautiful flowers and gardens. And that's coming up just in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
All right. Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Annie.
All right. I am going to end